Good evening, it's 8 o'clock. Well, breaking tonight, the big headline is that finally every Indian above 18 can get vaccinated from May the 1st. This comes on India's worst day of COVID cases and deaths. 50% of vaccines will be procured by the centre, but now 50% can be procured by states and they can decide what their priority is. This, as I said, comes amid India's worst COVID surge. The decision comes, however, as vaccinations currently are showing a dramatic fall. The Prime Minister took this decision after a series of emergency meetings. Today's numbers are getting more worrying. 2,73,000 cases, 1,619 deaths, India's worst day. India now has 1 in 3 of global COVID cases. India's COVID emergency. So now finally the government is in an emergency mode. Within 24 hours, the Prime Minister has chaired 4 meetings. Big decisions taken. Delhi, India's capital, goes into lockdown from 10 p.m. tonight till Monday morning. At least Delhi locks down as cases are over now, 24,000. Essential services and public transport will be open. The Chief Minister appeals to migrant labour not to leave, saying it's just a 6-day lockdown. But look at these pictures from Delhi's bus stands as the migrant exodus begins again. The Allahabad High Court orders a lockdown in 5 cities of Uttar Pradesh. The state government says no. In a strong verdict, the Allahabad High Court says governments are to blame if large number of people die. There's enough to spend on elections, but not on public health. This as Panchayat elections are being held today in Uttar Pradesh. The Telangana High Court also tells the state order a curfew or lockdown within 24 hours or we will. And the Delhi High Court's tough directions to the state as well. Meanwhile, ex-Prime Minister, 88-year-old ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh tests COVID positive. Also testing positive is Telangana's Chief Minister KCR. However, best wishes are pouring in for the ex-Prime Minister. This as news comes of KCR testing positive as well. Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee cuts down on the Bengal campaign amid COVID. The Prime Minister will hold 4 rallies in one day this week in West Bengal as public controversy rises that amidst the campaign, hospital beds in Kolkata have run out. So what's different in the second wave? 55% more oxygen is needed in the second wave, say the government's top doctors. Also, that more patients this time have shortness of breath as a symptom. Government doctors also say that young people are not more impacted in the second wave, according to data. Markets crashed today amid a COVID record high. The Sensex down by nearly 900 points. And amid the lockdown blues in Delhi, people are rushing to liquor shops. This woman says, forget the vaccine, I need a peg to beat corona. The big breaking news from 1st May, every Indian above 18 can get vaccinated. This comes after the Prime Minister had a series of emergency meetings today as we've hit a new high in our COVID numbers of cases and deaths. Vishnu has the latest on those.
Well, this has clearly been a day when there have been so many developments as far as COVID is concerned. First, as you mentioned, anybody above the age of 18 will be eligible to get the vaccine when it starts out on the 1st of May. Now, how is it actually going to work? It's part of what's being called a liberal vaccine policy, whereby 50% of vaccines will be reserved for the centre, the remaining ones to states or to the open market. This is very, very important because there was a huge crisis as far as prices were concerned. If it is open to the market, then people who are willing to pay for vaccines will be allowed to buy it. However, those who need vaccines and cannot afford it continue to be a part of the 50% quota of the centre. So people are protected. The numbers hopefully will go up sharply. So the centre is stuck to free doses for healthcare workers and also all above 45. A second dose will be given on priority. India needs to ramp up its vaccination manufacturing. We are also told that moves to do that are presently underway and could likely be announced soon. Why are we focusing so much on vaccination? We are focusing on vaccination so much because of this number. There is a 25% dip from the 10th of April peak of vaccination in terms of the number of people being vaccinated right now? Is it because of surging numbers that people don't want to get out of their homes? Are there other reasons? But that number is not good enough at this present rate. It would take several months for even the 45 plus age group to be vaccinated. Now, more vaccines for more Indians, and therefore hopefully more people will be protected. But let's move on to the other key aspect of what happened today. The Prime Minister held a series of meetings, one meeting in fact, with a series of health officials across the country. Prime Minister spoke to doctors from cities with experience in COVID management. He spoke about the importance to reach out to those in unserved areas. He took a lot of questions and he figured out what it is that needs to be done now. Shortly after that, within a few hours, that very important announcement on 18-year-olds and above being allowed to get the vaccine. Sonia.
Right, and of course he met with pharmaceutical companies, so the big question will of course be supply as well. But Vishnu, the other big story today, and that really is a story which is impact so many political leaders writing in, is on ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, 88 years old, who's been diagnosed with COVID just after he'd actually written a letter to the Prime Minister with recommendations on how this could be handled. What's the latest news on that?
Well, how sad is that, Sonia? Manmohan Singh, such a fine thinker, 88 years old, former Prime Minister, now at the AIIMS Trauma Centre, which is a COVID ward of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. He is COVID positive. But look at the context of what exactly took place. It was just yesterday that he wrote a letter where in that letter to the Prime Minister, he said people need to be allowed to have vaccines. Let states define categories of frontline workers. Let states who want to vaccinate school teachers, bus drivers, three-wheeler drivers, taxi drivers, municipal staff, let them go ahead with this. Vaccine distribution among states should be based on a transparent formula. The centre must proactively support vaccine producers by providing funds and concessions. And then, of course, there was this very unfortunate war of words in a sense which broke out, because you've had Harshvardhan, the health minister, replying to these eminently practical suggestions made by Manmohan Singh, where he said, among other things, that your suggestions implemented a week prior to your letter, history would be kinder to you if the Congress took your advice. And just today, after this all happened, and rather uncharacteristic for Dr. Manmohan, I beg your pardon, for Dr. Harshvardhan to have written in that tone, uncharacteristic, but just then Manmohan Singh falls unwell, COVID positive at the All India Institute.
So, ex-Prime Minister Manmohan Singh admitted now to AIIMS with fever. We've been told, Vishnu, that his condition is stable, but of course, we will get more details on that later. But what exactly, why these emergency meetings today? Because India reported its highest ever single-day spike of COVID-19 cases. We now have over 2.73 lakh new cases and more than 1,600 deaths in the last 24 hours. Now, how does that actually compare? We are actually now contributing 1 in 3 infections globally. That's how high our current numbers actually are. But what's more worrying is the fact that there's been a rise in death as well. There have been 1,619 deaths in the last 24 hours. That's the highest ever. That's just 38 less than Brazil today, which is the highest in all. As you can look at, over 16,000 people have died in April. That's more than January, February, March combined. 16,000 Indians have died, and they've been rising the deaths at a scary rate of almost 10% a day this month. The first wave peak last September was an average of 1% a day. And really the tragic visuals we're seeing, and these are visuals which are heartbreaking for every Indian, is how our cremation grounds are absolutely crowded. And they, in fact, those pyres are giving the lie to official figures, which say often there are only 5 official deaths, as cremation grounds report that over 20 people are cremated in a day. Joining me now is Sonakshi from Ghaziabad in Uttar Pradesh, Anurag from Bhopal in Madhya Pradesh, and Purva from Mumbai as well, where Purva, today in Maharashtra, over 500 deaths despite the lockdown. I mean, that's a record high, the first state to cross 500 deaths in 24 hours. We'll just go back to Purva, but let's go across. In fact, Anurag, what we talked about is the fact that how cremation grounds, these pyres, are bearing witness to the real stories of Indians who've lost their lives to COVID, whereas official figures refuse to acknowledge those dead lives, those dead people.
Yes, Sonia, and now the dead bodies are revealing the truth. If my camera person can show you, we are at Bhadbhada crematorium in Bhopal, and this is a dedicated COVID crematorium. You can see the dead bodies. The official figure for today in Bhopal is 5, and the overall figure for the state.
Those pyres, they're burning even at night, burning in cremation grounds, crematoriums working 24/7. Sonakshi, you're at Ghaziabad in Uttar Pradesh, where again we know it really is an absolutely terrible situation in terms of hospital facilities, in terms of beds and people dying because of the lack of oxygen and other facilities. Sonakshi?
That is absolutely right. The visuals behind me are telling enough. These are people who have died because of COVID, but the visuals behind me in Ghaziabad from a cremation ground, at least 110 COVID deaths have taken place. But let's remind ourselves that these are not just mere statistics. These are loved ones of somebody. But at this particular cremation ground at a crematorium, here you would see something that is unusual is that a space is now being made for the incoming flow of the COVID deaths being lit on that. You can see the visuals behind me on these footpaths, which is of course a part of the cremation ground, but spaces are being made and created to be able to accommodate in.
So, Sonakshi, I mean, you're saying that's part of the cremation ground, but it's actually on the pavement, the footpath of the crematorium, and you can see it's now 8 o'clock at night, and you still have people there in PPE suits, grieving families and cremation workers. Purva, let's go across to you now if the connection is all right. In Maharashtra, the figures still telling a very tragic tale.
Yes, absolutely. But in Mumbai right now, I am outside Sion Crematorium, and here, in Mumbai, there are about 51 crematoriums which are BMC run, and that is why it gets divided. But Sion Crematorium is what we've been told is gets about 15 to 20 bodies every day, and that is like a wait time of at least an hour. So definitely the chimney is consistently burning here in Mumbai. Most of the crematoriums are electric crematoriums, and the chimneys consistently burn, be it the Shivaji Park crematorium or even the Varli crematorium, Sion crematorium. These are all big crematoriums. At night especially, like dead of night especially, is when we've been told that the ambulances are there, and that's when, but it is kind of managed because there are about 51 crematoriums in Mumbai, but the situation is really bad in rural Maharashtra where you do not even have electric fences and the pyres are continuously burning. That is the scenario in rural Maharashtra, and as you've been pointing out, 500 deaths all across Maharashtra. That's a very tragic figure there.
Anurag, across to you, because we know this in so many states. We know in UP, in Bihar, in Gujarat, there's similar stories, and in Madhya Pradesh. Why is the government not facing up to the problem? Why are they not facing up to the truth that those burning pyres are telling?
Yes, Sonia, I asked the same question to the government officials, and they said that, we are not going to get any reward if we conceal the figures. But these figures will tell you the truth, and clearly the government is lying, because the number of, deceased, cremated or buried in Bhopal is far higher than what the official records have been stating over the past days. The cremation grounds in Bhopal that would see 5 to 10 bodies being brought earlier are now seeing 35 to 40 bodies on a daily basis. And you can see both sides of this Bhadbhada crematorium in Bhopal. The number of bodies that are cremated following the COVID protocols is far higher than what the official figures show in Bhopal. As I said, today the official figure is just 5. And you can see the dead bodies here in Bhadbhada crematorium, Bhopal, and a few days back also we have found around 187 bodies were cremated at the two sites in Bhopal, in Bhadbhada and Subhash Nagar, Vishram Ghat. But the officials, because these crematoriums have established designated COVID section to cremate those who died of COVID-19, and we have reported time and again that how these dead bodies in these crematoriums are telling a fact, and the government is concealing the death figures in Madhya Pradesh and Bhopal. Sonia?
Anurag, thanks so much. I mean, I can imagine how painful it is for all our reporters to be actually covering this, because each of these, also when you see these pyres burning without the families there, often in quarantine, positive themselves, it really is heartbreaking, because each of the statistics we report every day is a person, someone's loved one, a family member. It really is heartbreaking to see that. And it's really with stories like that coming out, these cremation grounds burning, that we see that lockdowns are being announced in state after state. Today, Delhi's chief minister, after meeting the lieutenant governor, said Delhi will go into a 6-day lockdown. There was literally no choice.
आज 25,000 केस आए हैं. अब दिल्ली का हेल्थ सिस्टम अपनी सीमा तक पहुंच गया है. हमारा हेल्थ सिस्टम अब बहुत ज्यादा तनाव में है.
Beginning on today at 10 p.m., Delhi will have a 6-day lockdown till 5 a.m. next Monday. At one of Delhi's biggest bus and railway terminal at Anand Vihar, thousands of migrant workers are rushing home.
पिछली बार है हमने बहुत मार खाई थी, सब्जी फब्जी बेच दी थी, बहुत ज्यादा कहते हैं खाने को मिलेगा, हमें कुछ नहीं मिला था पिछली बार भी. मैम पिछली बार भी हमें 2 दिन का बोला था, फिर 2 से 4, 4 से 8 ऐसे पिछली बार भी बढ़ाते गए, फिर हम फंस गए यहाँ पे. हमें
इस दौरान जाहिर है कि जो एसेंशियल सर्विसेज हैं वो जारी रहेंगी, खाने पीने की, मेडिकल व्यवस्थाओं की वो जारी रहेंगी.
But here is what is allowed. Food, dairy and grocery shops, pharmaceuticals and opticians, banks and ATMs, delivery of essentials through e-commerce, fuel pumps, home delivery of food, metro and buses at 50% capacity within stipulated time, no standing passengers allowed in public transport, up to 2 passengers in autos and cabs, 50 guests allowed at a wedding with a valid marriage card, cap of 20 people for funeral rites. And here is what is not allowed. Bars and restaurants, malls and shopping centers, public parks and educational centers, swimming pools, spas and gyms, salon and barber shops, social or political gatherings, entertainment or cultural gatherings, religious or festive gatherings. Crowds rushed to stock up on liquor, but this morning several of Delhi's more crowded markets had declared a self-lockdown.
तो ग्राहक आएगा ही नहीं तो हम दुकान खोल के करेंगे क्या?
ये यहाँ जगह पे काम दुकान खुलता था तो कमाते थे हम लोग, इसलिए बंद हो गया, बंद हो जाएगा तो कमाएंगे कहाँ से?
Delhi's lockdown was perhaps to be expected after the chief minister himself tweeted out just 1 day ago describing the situation as an emergency. The 6-day lockdown comes as a need of the hour. With camera person Prem Singh, Shanakshi Chakravarti for NDTV.
These corridors that you are seeing, the ones that we are walking through at this point of time, are the corridors of a Delhi government run school on DDU Marg in Delhi. This school has been divided into 2 zones. The area that we are standing on right now is the green zone. The other part is going to be the red zone, and this entire area where students would usually sing the national anthem, the school assemblies would go on, school functions would go on, little kids, students would be seen here on a usual day, but now it's meant for COVID patients. 125 beds with oxygen concentrators and cylinders, all of these facilities to ramp up Delhi's hospital infrastructure. What you see around me are usual posters of Saina Nehwal. This is the place where Commonwealth Games are held, places that are on usual days a sports complex. This is a badminton hall where we are standing. So that is what this facility is usually used for, but now it has been converted into a COVID care center with at least 465 beds. 215 of them at least are oxygen beds. The rest are non-oxygen beds, regular COVID-19 beds. You see oxygen cylinders here. There are beds. There are very soon going to be LCD screens as well for the patients who will be admitted here. They can watch those as well for their entertainment, so that they are not as psychologically tensed or troubled because they are anyway battling the disease. This sports complex is being attached with LNJP, so only mild to moderate symptom patients will be treated here. Any serious ones will be taken to the ICU in LNJP.
You can see on the daily basis we are getting almost 25,000 cases in Delhi. It's worst situation we are facing. since the beginning of the pandemic, it's highest spike we are seeing, and in the next coming days, we expecting that cases might go upwards. So, and most of the tertiary care hospitals are filled, no ICU beds, no simple COVID wards are filled. So we have started a makeshift hospital here.
So thankfully beds being extended there as well. But 3 high courts today have slammed state governments. The strongest is the Allahabad High Court, which in an unprecedented order ordered a lockdown in 5 of Uttar Pradesh's cities, saying that if people die of a pandemic in a large number due to the paucity of sufficient medical aid, it would be the governments to blame, which failed to counter the pandemic even after 1 long year of experience and learning. The High Court also came down strongly on currently panchayat elections and other elections being held, saying that one would only laugh at us that we have enough to spend on elections and very little to spend on public health. They added in what seems to be an indictment of, well, both the state and the centre, saying that those in the hem of affairs of governance are to be blamed for the present chaotic health problems in Uttar Pradesh. And they also asked the Uttar Pradesh government about restricting the public movement to break the chain. They said, but you gave us nothing concrete in the affidavit. However, in a development, the Uttar Pradesh government has said no, they are not going to listen to the High Court, which has actually ordered a lockdown in 5 cities, including Varanasi, the Prime Minister's constituency, Allahabad or Prayagraj, Gorakhpur and other areas as well. The Uttar Pradesh government has said we will not. This as the Telangana High Court also slammed the state government, saying that the government must within 48 hours decide on a lockdown or curfew. This comes as the Chief Minister of Telangana has also tested positive. The court said otherwise it will issue orders. The Delhi High Court today also came down strongly on the state government, saying that adequate arrangements must be made for migrants and that RT-PCR reports must be given in 24 hours. Well, now moving to what we've just been, the huge controversy of about the oxygen demand side, which minister said, and meetings on how to actually get more oxygen. And the government has now confirmed, the government's top health officials, that the need for more oxygen is real. In fact, in this second wave, the government doctors said 55% more patients have needed oxygen and more shortness of breath is being reported as a symptom.
So this is data from hospitalized patients during the first wave and during the second wave. Here in the second wave, we have found that the oxygen utilization has been found to be 54.5% versus 41.1%. So it is higher in the second wave, number 1 point. Sudden surge of cases, so there was a panic, people wanted to get admitted to hospitals and therefore the oxygen requirement suddenly shot up. We would like to ensure that all hospitals and all physicians ensure that the oxygen usage has to be very, very rationalized, number 1. And number 2, wastage of oxygen should not happen.
Well, let's go across to the other big international stories. Well, the worry now about the double mutant virus, which is showing up in India across the world, as more reports are coming in of this virus being reported, this double mutation virus being reported. And the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called off his visit. Let's go across to Radhika Iyer live, who's been tracking that. This comes, of course, amid calls for the India to actually put on Great Britain's red list. Radhika.
In breaking news that's just coming in, Sonia, India has now been added to the red list, the travel red list. Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary of the United Kingdom, has just made this announcement, which probably was a reaction to the mounting pressure that the UK government was facing from scientists, from public health authorities, from the Labour Party, from opposition, as well as Londoners, as well as people who live in the United Kingdom. What does this mean? This means that anybody traveling into the United Kingdom from India will have to compulsorily hotel quarantine for 10 working days or 10 days. This, of course, has not been in place until now because people have been quarantining themselves only at home. It's also a matter of fact that people are able to allow to enter the United Kingdom only on an emergency, case of an emergency and not for a holiday. I have with me Michael Ludzenberger, who's a frequent traveler. Michael, you've traveled to what, 92 countries so far? 92 countries so far. My first question, of course, is your reaction to the fact that this announcement has just come in, that India has now finally made it to that red list. Good thing, bad thing? What do you think?
I think the way the situation have been going over the last few days in India, both with the number of cases and the new variant, it probably hasn't been a surprise that it is coming now, because other countries previously have been added to the list where it went to that extent.
Sure. And the fact that we in the UK are just now opening up after a prolonged lockdown, the 77 cases that have already been reported in the United Kingdom, that will have an impact, do you think?
Probably not to public life so much at the moment, I don't think, because we are just opening up and it is a small number. But I think the strict lockdown has worked in other countries, so it is probably the right thing to do at this moment in time. But also one thing to remember is that travel is still severely restricted anyway, so it won't have such a big impact, because it's only people on emergency visas for health reasons, for example, or very specific traveling reasons are allowed into the UK, and British citizens are not allowed to travel for at least another month. So it will be only a very small number of people who are affected.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Michael. 77 cases of the Indian variant have been reported in the United Kingdom. This is a variant that was first tracked in India, and that has now been detected in the United Kingdom.
Thanks so much.
And this was as of 3 days ago. We are waiting for the fresh bulletin.
Thanks so much, Radhika, for that update. Well, a quick look at other news. The Sensex Nifty also crashing today. The Sensex down by over 800 points. But before Delhi actually goes into its lockdown from 10 o'clock tonight, here's what people are queuing up for. No, it's not groceries, though, of course, are remaining open. But liquor shops, long queues seen there. And, well, this woman's view on why they're all crowding today at liquor shops amid Delhi's record surge in cases.
कि ये अल्को इसमें इंजेक्शन फायदा नहीं करेगा, ये अल्को फायदा करेगी। हाँ, ये जितनी दारू बिकती है उतने बंदे सही रहेंगे जो शराबी है।
Don't take that advice seriously, but at least you can have somebody who's, well, living high even amidst this pandemic.